Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Invincible. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, we have Nolan talking a little bit to Mark, obviously teaching him how to fly and everything. But what's interesting, though, is obviously he had the whole conversation about being a Viltrumite and the whole thing of, having to leave his world behind and, going, obviously him and his people going out there to save the universe. Once again, we don't know how much of that is BS or not. But for him, because obviously for Mark, it's a situation of him being like, I don't think I could ever do that, leave everything behind. Because obviously for him, he talks about, hey, this was just a mission from the beginning, but then I met your mom and it changed everything. He fell in love and it was no longer just a mission. I think that might be the one part of this that isn't BS. When he says he loves Debbie and Mark, I think that is true. I think it's a thing of he's still trying to accomplish whatever his mission is, whether it's to be put Earth in a situation where it doesn't have the proper defenses for a full-blown invasion from the Viltrumites, whatever the case may be. I think regardless of it, he does love Debbie and Mark, and I think when it's all said and done, he's going to try and save them because he makes such a point in this episode to say, Debbie, you just have to trust me. And trust me, I'll just keep us together as a family, Because obviously Debbie is slowly but surely kind of becoming very suspicious of him. Just because of what Damien said last episode and just like, it's just not adding up and just more and more suspicion. But even, Nolan able to kind of flip that around by being like, yeah, Cecil, he thinks I'm the one responsible. I'm the only survivor, not human, so they need a target. But he's like, he's trying to, I'm so innocent. If only there was a way to prove my innocence. It's like, oh man. It just makes what he does that more psychotic. The fact is that he's just trying to feign this innocence and everything like that when you brutally murdered 7 people. And him wanting to spend time with his wife, because obviously she's like, you've been mean and cold recently, especially with that remark about Olga. That Olga wants to sell her house. Yeah, because she thinks that there's a conspiracy that going on, and he was like, she needs to stop drinking. And she was like, Nolan. It's like, well, come on, you remember what she was like at the last Christmas party? It's like, but yes, her significant other was brutally murdered, so of course she'd not be in the best place. But it's like for her to kind of be looking for there more and him being so dismissive, that in itself is what Debbie was talking about. It's like, you're so mean lately, and he's just trying to be like, it's just because everything that's going on, and obviously he tried to make it seem like, yeah, you're right, I am keeping something from you, and that's what it is, like that Cecil think I'm the one responsible. So I just thought that was interesting, because initially he was signed up to go on, like Cecil wanted him to go on this Mars mission, which we now later on, immediately afterwards, find out like, oh, he set that whole thing up because he was trying to get Nolan off Earth, so it gives him an opportunity to kind of investigate, because they believe what Damien said about it being Nolan that is responsible for everything. But Nolan doesn't want to do the mission because he's like, yeah, Earth's going to need me in case something terrible happens without the Guardians here, right? So Mark volunteers, which Cecil looks at this as an opportunity. At least he can judge what kind of person Mark is, and if Mark kind of that if Mark proves, whether or not, one doomsday situation at a time of like, if Mark ends up being a problem, he'll be a problem. But that right now, he just wants to see like where his heart is. If the kid's got his heart in the right place, we'll see whether or not his dad's the only problem, whether his dad will be someone we have to worry about. Because you don't, once again, make the argument he's not as strong as his dad because he's half human. His dad's 100% Viltrumite, so you'd assume he's got, like, Mark will never be as strong as him, or at least as powerful. Once again, we don't know, like, the rules of, like, their biology and, like, how that necessarily works. Then you have Mark being in that complicated situation of, obviously he went out with Amber, things have been good, but now he's on this mission. I love the whole thing of like, yeah, I'll fly there and back. And his dad, Nolan, being like, the fact is you don't know how far away Mars is proof that you can't miss school. I was like, it's like, oh, yeah, it's going to be a 2-week mission. He was like, 2 weeks? I don't think I can do this. But his mom convinced him. It's like, no one else can tell you what you can do with these powers. Yes, you can help a lot of people, but at the end of the day, it's going to be your choice what you decide to do with them. What kind of person, what kind of hero you decide you want to be. And so Mark accepts the mission and, kind of last second, meets up with Amber's like, yeah, I kind of got to go on this trip for like 2 weeks. Promise your way. And it's like, yeah, I'll keep interested in you. So that's kind of cool. He had an interesting conversation with Gwen because Gwen's in the middle of trying to figure everything out because it's like being a superhero sucks. It's not just everything going on between her and Rex. It's just everything, balancing school and everything. It's like she's trying to decide if that's really what she wants or not. I guess just because... I guess it's also like you see the dark side of like being a superhero, and I guess it just kind of takes its toll on you. Plus, it's like, once again, relationship wise, it doesn't work out for you, so it's just kind of like, But it was also the conversation of, are you going to tell Amber the truth about yourself? Secret identities, like once you open that box, it better be someone that you really are serious about. And it seemed like he might have was willing to go down that direction, but he didn't. So he just kind of made an excuse of like, yeah, and was super vague about where he's going. So he takes off with the mission and everything. I even love, it's like, oh yeah, pack a lunch, and he's eating the sandwich and it's like frozen. Space is super cold after all, so it makes sense. Because I guess the whole point, it's supposed to be a secret mission because it's supposed to be like, hey, because Cecil's like, humanity needs this. Humanity needs a win. So, especially after recent alien invasions and stuff like that. So we need a win. So we're gonna keep this top secret. Don't let them know that you're on the ship and everything. And obviously, like, I love that he's on this mission. Side note, I love that guy, we see him for that one, for like 3 seconds or whatever, he flies by the screen. It's the guy that, like, I think Immortal knocked him into space in the first episode. I was like, oh, that poor bastard's been floating in space since episode, like, what was that, near the end of episode 1, too. I'm like, man, that's crazy. It's just like a little gag thing. And I burst into laughter about that. Another thing that made me laugh is like, obviously Nolan confronting Damien. It's like, oh, you were in my house. Like, stay away from my family. It's like, oh, you're the murderer. And he's like, it could have been you, which I love that Nolan's just throwing it on him. It's just like, I mean, I guess when you're the killer, you have to throw suspicion on someone else. But it's like, I guess because he's trying to be adamant by like, oh, if I'm throwing it at you, that means I'm not the killer. It's like, he just such a half-assed attempt. But it's like, okay, your wife already suspects. And how long is it going to be before your son suspects? And I just love the line of, go fuck yourself, Darkblood, and leaves. I don't know why. Just like the fact that he's like, go fuck yourself, Darkblood, and immediately dashes out the room. I don't know why. I literally burst into laughter. I was like, I like that line. Just go fuck yourself, Darkblood. I just thought that was interesting. Which even Debbie was secretly looking into some of the stuff about Darkblood. Even Damien about the fact is like, oh yeah, it takes a demon to shed light on the truth or something like that. So there's different articles written about kind of, I guess, his exploits and what he's kind of accomplished. But focusing on everything on Mars, I love that, like, he's so... I mean, to be fair, this is kind of his first out, well, technically, they bring it up. He's like, I was in space before. It's like, yeah, you went to the moon. It doesn't count. So it's like, which I think is interesting that we're immediately doing that, because someone had brought, like, I've heard some people talk about, obviously, and fortunate enough, no one's really going into spoilers about the comic book, but people are saying that at least the comic starts off very Earth-based, and then eventually as the series progresses, we start branching out there. So obviously everything with Alan in episode 3, I believe that was last week, that was episode 3, I believe, with Alan the alien, because they're doing certain things probably a little out of order than the comic book, so there might slowly branch out to the rest of like the universe, kind of space and other planets and stuff like that. They'll probably slowly spread out for that, just kind of getting your like feet wet with the idea and just like all the different planets and stuff. They'll probably do that early on before they eventually go to later points in the series where it just kind of spreads out and no longer just Earth-based. I think it's so interesting because there's very few superhero things that are not Earth-based. I can only think of like 2 things, like on the top of my head. Supergirl and Captain Marvel. I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy as well with 3, and Thor as well. So there's like 4 right there. So, but it's not something that happens. Most things stay on Earth. They stay Earthbound. So it's interesting to kind of get the more like space side of things, like even more so this episode. And some people might take offense to this. I hope you don't, because I'm a big fan of the show, but it's like this episode almost felt like Ben 10ish, because Ben has been on like missions like this too, so it definitely makes me feel Ben 10ish, especially because he's kind of like very inexperienced, because like Ben Tennyson he's a very cocky superhero. Like, he gets very full of himself and think he's on top of everything, and that obviously that cockiness can be his undoing many times. So it reminded me of that just tonally with the episode, because it's not like it's like a super bloody episode in that regard. The only other blood that's really up here, it's like Cecil is like welcoming. Well, the Guardians check out their place. He's like, oh man, this is so awesome. Oh wait, there's a blood spot over there. And Cecil's like, oh no, we left that on purpose. Let it be a reminder anytime you think you're hot shit. You prove yourselves, then we'll clean up the blood. I'm like, that's so weird. I mean, I get the symbolism behind it. So I'm like, did you really mean to do that? Or did you just forget about it? And it's like, no, it seems too purposeful. But it's just so crazy. Like, oh, yeah, we left that there to be a reminder that you idiots, like, don't think, if you ever get full of yourself, remember, your predecessors got it hard. So once you've proven yourself, then we'll come here and clean up the blood. It seems so weird. Since I'm talking a little Earthbound, obviously Nolan and Debbie go on their date and everything, and he's like, trust me. And then proceeding while he's doing all that, there's a dragon attacking. She's like, Nolan, aren't you going to do it? He's like, I just need to know that you trust me. And she's almost like, okay, yes, I trust you. Almost like, now aren't you going to do something about a dragon? He's like, what? No, I'm on vacation. Let Cecil and them handle. I'm like, that's such a dick thing to do. I mean, I guess it makes sense, but it's kind of an asshole thing of like people are in danger and you're like, fuck that. I'm on vacation. Let's see. Cecil wants to act all tough and stuff like he got so much under control. Let him handle this. But the Mars mission kind of goes sideways immediately because Mark wasn't paying attention. Like, he fell asleep. He was too busy checking his phone, keeping an eye on it. It's like, oh man, I miss Amber. I want to go back. Oh man, new relationship energy. That NRE. It's so good. New relationship energy. But the fact of the matter is, he kind of failed at his job and like, oh, the astronauts got taken away. And then he meets the rest of the Martians. And I love the thing of like, wait, they're like, you're speaking English. And he was like, they're like, no, we're speaking Martian. So I guess as a Viltrumite, he's naturally like translating everything to a human language. Maybe it's just like a bit. They never went into that. They were just like, yeah. I even learned the whole thing of like, yes, there's Cecil being like, yes, there's Martians. Where do you think Green Martian came from? He's like, honestly, I never thought about it. But nevertheless, I just like, obviously him getting introduced and be like, yeah, they were here. Like, I'm kind of supposed to be keeping an eye on him. And even the astronauts being like, yeah, well, you kind of suck at that. Like, you were supposed to keep an eye on us and look where we are. And it's like, don't worry. I forgot what he said. He said something to the Emperor, and the Emperor looked at his right-hand guy, and his right-hand guy just shrugged. I was like, what? Even later on, it's like, how are you not affected by, what is it, Sequid? And it's like, well, I'm part Viltrumite. You know what they are? You're aware of us? He's like, I'm the Emperor of the Martians. Of course I know who you are. And he looks at his right hand guy, and his right hand guy shrugs again. I was like, oh, I guess it's like you have to pretend like you know what's what. But basically, he talks about the Sequid being these creatures that basically came here. They, after like ravaging and annihilating some of the universe, they crash landed here, and without a host, they can't like be in full unison and kind of be the world-ending monsters that they are, but because the Martians have a shape-shifting ability that protects them. But I love that, but it's like, oh, Mark's like, so let's just kind of, I'll take the humans, we'll just kind of get out of here, that way you don't have to worry. It's like, no, we can't take the chance that one of those humans gets possessed and then sends this into a flurry, so they have to be executed. He's like, I understand. Cut to black. Cut back. He's running with the rest of them, and they're being shot at and everything. I love the whole thing. All right, check the blah 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 levels. Check the oxygen levels. They're getting shot at. He's like, oh, fuck it. And they're trying to take off. Marcus lifting up the ship and everything, and he's getting shot at. He's like, ow, ow, ow. I even love the whole thing. He comes back for the rock. He's like, yeah, so we're good, right? So I'm just gonna take this, and yeah, no hard feelings. But it turns out one of the astronauts, I'm assuming is a Martian, because there was some shape-shifting involved, like of his uniform. At first I was like, well, is that one of his secrets? But we find out the real astronaut is stuck on that planet on Mars, and he got possessed. And I'm like, oh, so Mark screwed up big time. It's like, yeah, I mean, he left one of them. He screwed up big time because actually there's a Martian amongst them. And also, he ended up screwing the pooch, and one of the humans ended up getting left behind. And now that Mars, the Martian people might be wiped out now because of it. It's like, man, once again, I think they leaned even more so into the comedic element for this side of things. And it's like, man, you screwed the pooch big time. And I like that. It's like, oh yeah. And I don't know if he's going to be aware of how big of the, pooch he screwed until we find out, like, oh yeah, like, I'm assuming that once again, you don't know like how much they're planting seeds for. Like, because that Martian thing might be like something that doesn't pay off until like way later. We'll see. But I love he came back and he hears some rumbling in the house, and he's like, crap. and he goes in there and it's like Nolan's pushing a lamp back into place. Oh wow, we didn't expect you to. So I was like, ew, gross, you guys are banging it out. I mean, ill and gross from Mark's perspective. From my perspective, like, yo, you do what you got to do. You weren't expecting him home so quickly, but even he kind of picks up on it. He's like, obviously not as much fun as you guys were. And they're like, oh, we can talk about it over dinner, blah, 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 blah. Which I thought was interesting because I was wondering if it had something to do with Damien, because obviously he was caught snooping in Nolan's house, but Cecil and the group came in and like arrested him. But Cecil knows he has nothing to do with it. It's like, yeah, I know that blood was planted on you, but we got to make Nolan think he's in the clear, because I got to find out, for one, why Nolan did what he did, but also I need to figure out how to stop him. He's literally one of the most powerful beings, which I thought that was interesting too. I'm circling around. I'm a little all over the place in this review. I do apologize. That's kind of nothing new. But it was an interesting debate earlier. It's like, oh, why are you working so hard? You're the wife of the great, Earth's great hero, Omni-Man. And she's like, you did not just say that. He's like, what? Like almost demeaning her to be like, oh, you should just be, I mean, come on, like, you're my wife. Like, that's the most important thing. Like, oh, I'm not supposed to. She's like, I like doing stuff. I like working. Like, so it's almost like you should, he was almost making it sound like, oh, you should just be happy and satisfied being my wife. You're Omni-Man's wife, like all that, like almost like implying that that's all there is to her. So I just thought that was fascinating. But I also love him giving Amber that rock, and he was like, yeah, it's a rock from Earth. Just make sure you don't show it to any geologist or anyone that's really good at understanding stuff about rocks, because they might tell you something crazy. I love that. But also, like, Damien gets sent back to hell and everything, and Donald's like, oh, and Cecil's like, oh, now you care about the demon? Don't worry. He's not dead. Just send him back to hell. And Donald's like, isn't that worse? Which I thought was interesting when Damien was like, I'd say see you in hell, but you're going so much worse. Which I'm like, is there actually somewhere worse than hell in this continuity? Oh, that's interesting to kind of think about. But I also love the whole situation between Monster Girl and Rex. Is like, no, we're good, right? And he's like, oh, what? You knocked out my teeth, embarrassed me in front of all those super. She's like, yeah, you were kind of asking for it. He's like, yeah, you're right. The fact of the matter is, I mean, there are a whole bunch of assholes. And she's like, yeah, huge assholes. He's like, yeah, gaping, dirty, filthy assholes. She's like, all right. But then there's everything with Robot taking his blood. I'm like, what the hell is that about? Then we get like the stinger at the end. First stinger. There's the post credits, and then there was this. But it seems like he comes into like some facility and he bows down, and he's got Rex's blood sample, and it looks like there's something in the tube. And I'm like, at first I'm like, wait, what? What does that mean? So I'm like, my initial thought after the episode is he trying to like make a human body? So then what the hell? I mean, I guess it makes sense because like there's the Molar twins, like maybe that's why he busted them out. I thought it was like because I didn't know whether he's just like up to some shenanigans, like whether he's just up to some evil stuff, or whether or not he was doing that because it's like, oh, I want the Guardians to have somebody to fight so that they can like get, like I thought like it was kind of doing, like as I said last time, doing a little evil to do some good. It's like, oh, releasing these villains so they can come out looking like heroes, but also get them more well-oiled superhero team. I thought that might be an angle to that, but now it seems like maybe he released them because he needs their technology, or because one of the Molar twin is kind of making the other one. We saw that. That was interesting. It's like what he was dumping, it looked like burger patties, or like raw, like frozen burger patties or something like that, which was interesting. But I wonder, does he need that cloning technology? Because I'm wondering if he's trying to make a human body. Like, it's like, oh, I've been this robot, so everything he's done has been for the purpose of, I want to be human. And there's also the whole thing at the beginning we didn't touch on. It's like, yeah, that happened, and we just kind of left that alone, of like some mummy or whatever getting resurrected. And I'm like, what the hell is that about? There's so much stuff that I'm like, what? You just kind of left that alone. Like, I don't know if that's just, it makes you, like I said, is that just comic book stuff they're setting up well in advance? Or is that just stuff like it was presented like that in a comic book where it's just kind of like, okay. Because I'd actually heard someone talk about it. It's not a spoiler at this point in time. Is apparently Omni-Man killing the Guardians. Just from what I've heard, someone had described it as who was I listening? Oh, it's a Weekly Planet, because they had talked about it. I didn't listen to the entire thing, but I heard a little bit. But they were explaining that the Omni-Man thing at the end of episode 1, it happened like that, except it didn't show Omni-Man. They kind of kept it ambiguous who was responsible, and it wasn't until a little bit later that it was like, oh, Omni-Man was responsible for it. So the fact is, it kind of showed it ahead of time, kind of shows that obviously they're handling stuff from the comic book a little bit different in this adaptation. So it begs the question, that's why I'm curious, like, what else has kind of changed, or like, what's being brought up sooner than maybe it initially was, and maybe there's, like I said, just setting stuff up that we're not getting an answer to for a while, or so. I didn't know what to kind of make of it, so I just thought all of that was interesting. But we did have that stinger at the end where like Debbie was closing the closet, and it looked like there was like some tape or something, and we heard like Damien like growling, and I'm guessing like when he was fiddling around, he left some evidence proving that it was Nolan, but he left it somewhere he knew that Debbie would find, Debbie or Mark, because he was like, he knew probably things were going to go sideways considering Nolan threatened him, so he probably had an insurance policy kind of put into place to kind of flip Nolan the bird in his own right by turning his family against him, because once again, it seems like that is such an important thing to him, whatever it is that he's up to. So we'll see ultimately where all this takes us. I kind of like that this was like an advancement in the plot, but I also like that it is kind of like a superhero thing of like, yeah, like he's got to rise up to, be a superhero. So it's almost like an enemy of like, it's like any other superhero show. Because it's so interesting because like you have stuff like The Boys. The Boys is kind of designed to kind of continue this overarching plot. So it just seemed like this is continuing that overarching plot, but it feels like a superhero show where it's like, oh yeah, like there's a villain of the week type of thing. Like I said, it felt very Ben 10-ish to a certain degree, obviously. Like I said, this episode wasn't nearly as bloody as prior ones were, but obviously this show is definitely going to continue to be bloody, but it just, in that regard, it felt like kind of like I said, just a Ben 10 or just like another superhero show. But regardless, I'm really interested to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.